Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. As the title of this video suggests, we're discussing what I can only describe as seriously onerous banking issues here in Thailand now. Now, this stuff is primarily in a digital context, but as we'll get into, as I've discussed in it, first off, in a video I made contemporaneously with this one, there's now announcements. Destination Thailand visa holders are receiving notifications that their bank accounts, they need to show up at a bank and show their passports, etc., to verify their immigration status, which this is really getting ridiculous, and I'll get into this further as we get into the article I'm going to cite here. But, you know, when do the banks have any right to dictate or have anything to do with immigration? You know, this is really ridiculous. With this tying together, you know, I'm not going to go into I don't want to get into a screel here of what I think about the World Economic Forum and, you know, this totalitarianism of public-private interaction where private entities are doing what public entities can't do, and public entities will do what private entities can't do in order to just make all of our lives more miserable. I don't really want to get into that, but to preface this, understand, in the background is also the issue of DTV visa holders are seeing notifications that their accounts will be closed and that future DTV visa holders look like they're not going to be able to get banking facilities here in Thailand for whatever reason. So that's its own problem. It looks to me like the DTV, the reason for it is, as I've discussed, the DTV was entirely created by Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Ministry of Foreign Affairs doesn't have anything to do with internal immigration or internal matters here in Thailand. It really was not good policy making, in my opinion, because they didn't create a consensus between internal and external immigration. And basically, these DTVs are not considered non-immigrant visa status effectively. They're basically like really long exemptions, and specifically, they're not work authorized for Thailand. And as Interior has pointed out, anything that impinges upon the Thai economy, which could be anything, is considered necessary for work authorization. So basically, they're saying, hey, you can't have banking facilities because that would impinge upon Thailand's economy, and that's not what these visas are designed for. So not a great situation for Destination Thailand visa holders or those looking to get into the Destination Thailand visa. Before I jump into the article I'm going to cite here, I think it's worth pointing out, I'm going to get into what I expect to be quite a deep dive in our paid news service this upcoming weekend, probably Sunday. I will be making a long-form, basically, discussion on a lot of this stuff, banking, tax, as well as, you know, the political situation that's swirling all around us right now, both here in Thailand as well as in Southeast Asia generally, as well as matters pertaining to the conflict with Cambodia, albeit that seems to be subsiding at least somewhat at this particular moment, and just how all this plays into expat land here in Thailand and what folks can maybe expect in the upcoming week to 10 to 14 days. So those who are interested in long-form content on that, you may want to check out our paid news service. You can email us, media@integrity-legal.com, for paid news service information. Meanwhile, while I'm talking my book, very quickly, my better half and I did set up a restaurant here in downtown Bangkok. It is called Pancake Palace, as the name implies. It's breakfast anytime. We've also got American diner style food, chili bowls, cheeseburgers. We've got buffalo wings, best buffalo wings in the city, in my opinion, even grilled cheese sandwiches, glass bottle Coke. If you're interested, there's links in the description below. We'd love to see you at Pancake Palace. In any event, let me get into this. Thought of making this video after reading a recent article from the Bangkok Post, bangkokpost.com. Article is titled, Thailand Tightens Mobile Banking Transfer Limits. And there's a lot in this article, and I'm going to go through it here pretty much line by line. I do urge folks who are watching this video, maybe a good idea to go check out that article in detail. That said, quoting directly, the Bank of Thailand has set a daily transfer limit of 50,000 baht for children and the elderly using mobile banking, seeking to curb financial fraud. Now, first of all, this is framed as if it only pertains to them. As I'm going to get into as we go into a deeper dive, it does not. They're imposing all kinds of restrictions and parameters and things associated with banking, which my initial response to that is, where do you get the right to do this? You're just dictating to people. This is really kind of Soviet kind of thinking. I mean, just dictating to people, oh, if you're of a certain age, or, oh, if you're in these parameters, this is just how it is now. Meanwhile, I got to be honest with you, this is going to be devastating for Thailand's economy, in my opinion. Because look, I don't think Thai folks really understand, especially from a foreigner's perspective. I came to Thailand, and one of the reasons, it's not the only reason, but one of the reasons I loved living here and just dealing with things here is because it's not that it was easy, it was free. We didn't have all of this oversight, all this onerous nanny-minder thinking associated with banking or anything else here in Thailand when I first got here. And all that I've seen, especially in roughly the past 2 years, ever since we've seen this new government come in, all we've seen is just tightening down, nanny-minder restrictions, more totalitarianism. And we're seeing more of it now, and it's coming out. And this is from Bank of Thailand. So this is going to be all banks. It's not going to be one of these things of, because we've talked about this in other videos with retirement visas, Destination Thailand visas. Different banks are taking different positions, but as we'll get to in this article, even specific banks could be worse than what BOT is mandating. Let me get into it further. The new customer profiling system will set transfer limits based on the risk profile of each customer segment. So now we're all being assessed by the way, these are supposed to be banks. They're supposed to be service providers to us, the customers. We're not supposed to be serfs who have to be assessed and scrutinized by them. They make money off of us, the customer. It's not the other way around. Quoting further, said Dharani Seju, Assistant Government for Payment Systems Policy and Financial Consumer Protection. Payment systems policy. So this is going to be one of the people that gets to dictate to the entire country how people can be paid for private transactions between private individuals. It's really disheartening. Quoting further, it divides mobile banking users into 3 groups: suspected fraudsters, general users, and vulnerable customers. Note, during COVID, they put into everybody's mind the notion that we're all guilty until proven innocent. And in that case, it was guilty of having COVID, which created the presumption that, in order to, you had an affirmative duty to put on a mask because you might have COVID and you were presumed to have it. All of this is now bleeding into all of this later totalitarianism. And, they sort of prepared everyone's minds during COVID for all this nonsense. Be clear. In 2019, if they had tried to impose all of this stuff on us, would anybody have put up with it? I don't think so. I think people would be pretty angry. Quoting further, vulnerable customers include those under 15 years of age and over 65. Well, the other thing that struck me is, an over 65-year-old is an adult human. Now the government, not the government, but the bank just gets to dictate to those people, we presume you're incapacitated, therefore you have to deal with these onerous restrictions. That's ridiculous. Quoting further, daily transfer limits are categorized into 3 tiers: under 50,000 baht S, I think small, under 200,000 baht M, and above 200,000 baht L. So to them, above 200,000 baht, the equivalent of $6,000 US, is considered some large transaction that needs the most heightened levels of scrutiny. Quoting further, the limit assigned depends on the customer's risk profile and each bank's Know Your Customer assessment. So now we all have to be assessed and lined up and poked and prodded, and they got to give us a little report card. Quoting further, Ms. Dharani said the measure has already been applied to new mobile banking applicants, while existing users must gradually comply by the end of this year. What if we don't want to comply? And by the way, what gives you the right to make us comply about how we move our own money through your service? You're supposed to be the service providers. Quoting further, nevertheless, each bank will determine customer risk classification based on its own considerations. So the baseline for this is what I'm reading about. But as we've seen, each bank can have even more onerous restrictions that they put on in addition to this if they should so desire. Quoting further, and customers with good financial records will not be affected. This just reminds me of the constant comply, comply, comply. during COVID, be a good person, and everything will be all right. It's just ridiculous. Quoting further, quote, "The transfer limit depends on customers' financial behavior," unquote, said Ms. Downey. Quote, "For example, banks may start with lower limits for new or inactive clients." Well, what's an inactive client? And why would anybody want to set up a bank account with a place if they've got to go through all these hoops? You're not the government. You're private enterprises that are supposed to be facilitating transactions and banking functions for the business community to be able to do business. Quoting further, "Meanwhile, regular customers can continue transactions as usual." Well, it doesn't sound like it. What does that even mean when you're imposing all this new stuff that didn't exist 3 weeks ago? Quoting further, "Customers seeking higher transfer limits can request an upgrade from their banks." So now, again, it's all about now we got to go ask permission. "Please, sir, I want some more." In fact, I might make the thumbnail, "Please, sir, I want some more." Quoting further, "However, the central bank requires banks to pay special attention to vulnerable groups as they are more susceptible to fraud." And, this is the constant refrain that this is all done because of all this fraud and all this fraud. And at the end of this, they cite numbers, which I would love to see what they mean by these numbers and scams in this thing. Look, at the end of the day, there used to be an attitude in the world of caveat emptor, buyer beware. It is not on the government or the banks, for that matter, to have to run around and be nanny minders for everyone and communally. This is what this comes down to, and it is a hallmark of fascism and communism. It's called communal punishment. Oh, there's scammers that target people under 15 or people over 65. Therefore, everyone now in the banking system has to put up with these onerous restrictions. It's totalitarian, it's wrong, and it's ridiculous. That said, quoting further, "However, the central bank requires banks to pay special attention to vulnerable groups as they are more susceptible to fraud." Well, what's a vulnerable group? Who determines that? Quoting further, "Thailand has around 12 million mobile banking users. Existing central bank safeguards cap mobile banking transfers at 50,000 baht per transaction with facial recognition required." Quoting further, "and 200,000 baht per day in total." Well, thank you so much, central bank. And by the way, for anybody that doesn't think this won't have a devastating economic impact, watch what's going to happen. The velocity of money is going to go into the toilet. We're going to watch liquidity tank. The overall economy is going to become moribund, completely non-dynamic, because people can't move money around to make transactions and to do business. Quoting further, "Financial fraud remains a serious concern," said Ms. Darni. "In June alone, 24,500 scam cases related to money transfers were reported, causing total losses of 2.8 billion baht, an average of 114,000 baht per case." I would love to see how this is defined, again, as scam cases. I mean, was it really a scam, or it was defined that way because it didn't go the way somebody wanted? And if you look at the underlying relationship, it really was a business relationship, but it just resulted in a net loss. And then one party basically accused the other party of scamming them. That does happen, But again, it comes down to communal punishment. Because scams occur, we now have to all deal with a much more very obtuse, very difficult to deal with banking system that's slow and moribund and basically puts all of this nanny-minded restrictions on people who just want to do business. Quoting further, "The largest single fraudulent transfer amounted to a 4.9 million baht, according to the central bank." So one transfer that, by the way, that's about $150,000. So because of that, that's somehow justification. And there was one. And again, this is communal punishment thinking. This is Gulag Archipelago thinking, communist thinking, fascist thinking, totalitarian thinking. Oh, there was a scam once, therefore now we get to control all banking and restrict you down, grind your ability to do business and move money around down to just an incredible snail's pace. Or force you to use different methodologies to sort of get around all of this, which then we'll say is somehow, illicit. Quoting further, "Across the region, victims who transferred more than 50,000 baht per transaction to mule accounts," again, they use these buzzwords and things. It's like money laundering. That wasn't even a thing prior to 1987 when it was created under U.S. legislation, which I would argue was overreached then. Quoting further, accounted for the largest share of fraud cases at 22%, but made up as much as 76% of total losses. I would love to know where these numbers come from. Quoting further, on average, scammers needed only 3 minutes to siphon off half of the stolen funds. Again, fear-mongering. And again, look, scams happen. They're always going to happen. It doesn't matter what monetary system you create. It doesn't matter what banking system you have. It doesn't matter how things of value move around. You know, in barter systems, people scam each other. That's just, you know, there were law courts in ancient Sumeria talking about a guy who stole another guy's cattle or sheep or pigs or goats or something. You know, there's always going to be scams. It doesn't mean that you impose totalitarianism on the whole system. That's communist thinking. It's totalitarian thinking. Quoting further, well, victims typically took 19 to 25 hours to report the fraud. Again, this fear-mongering stuff, yes, this can be a problem. Why don't you put money, banks, into your anti-fraud systems of trying to counteract those problems rather than putting the onus on the public and on your own customers to have to go through all this nonsense of moving through hoops and doing all this bureaucratic neo-Soviet stuff to move their own money. Their own money. And they are your customer. You're supposed to be servicing them. Quoting further, for the first 6 months of this year, children under 15 were involved in 78,468 financial scam cases. Again, how is that defined? Where are those numbers even coming from? You know, what is it? I think it was Teddy Roosevelt said, lies, damn lies, and statistics. You know, I mean, I don't know. Quoting further, while victims over 65 accounted for 416,453 cases. Yeah, I get it. You know, older folks, they can have some problems and things. I thought Thailand was a family-oriented culture. I thought the point of being Thai and the Thai family unit was about taking care of one's old. You know, again, not this communal punishment nonsense of totalitarian regimes like the communists. You know, we'd be better off taking care of our own families. The banks would be better off implementing their own enforcement mechanisms to combat fraud rather than putting the onus on the public to not be able to move their own money around through the system, and therefore, as a result of all of this onus, having an overall negative impact on the overall Thai economy because we have no liquidity and we have no ability to move funds around in order to do business with our own money.